Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here. The reason why we wanted to speak to you was because we just put out the third print issue of our annual magazine. It's right here. And this includes our list of top 20 albums of the year. This year, there was so much music that we had to go through over 100 albums. And our entire team went through some amazing music to arrive at our list of top 20 albums of the year. Uh, all of you feature on this list. We really enjoyed listening to your albums and we wanted to speak to you and get more insights into the making of your music and just generally what your experience has been like. Speaking of your experience, obviously there were different challenges. All of you would have different experiences and stories to tell us, but the central theme, the biggest challenge for all of us, including us, has been the pandemic. Warren and Shreyas, your albums are very obviously uh, based on the pandemic. COVID-19 was the central theme of your albums. So I would like to start with you guys. Warren, maybe you can talk about your experience and just making of your album.
Yeah, sure. So I started writing the album shortly before the end of 2019. And I started making these little Instagram videos, almost like
Yeah.
little vignettes. And I thought, maybe I'll develop them later, when I get the time. And then suddenly the pandemic hit and all the time in the world was available. So I started, compiling that. In the middle, we kind of had to adjust to not gigging. So then I started teaching. And we had been planning on moving countries to New Zealand, like even as early as 2017 when my daughter was around one.
Oh.
So in that sense, all the plans were already put in motion. And then I just had to move it, ahead by 3 or 4 months because the flights were starting to become a problem. So we did the move, I think it was June that we did. And once I got here, it was like, I mean, I'd lived here before, but for Nia and Utra, my wife and daughter, everything was like new and different. So it was kind of getting them settled as well. So once that happened, and I had a little studio set up at home, then it became kind of easy to, get working on it. And plus, like in Bombay, everything is like very, cramped in terms of space. So you're like the guitars were all open instead of being packed in cases, for example. So then it became like, quite easy to, just pull them out and, start finishing these. And then thanks to technology, I was able to get Jay to play drums on some of it. And then I had Cole who played drums on the second album. So it was good to have him back on a Blackstratblues album after a span of like 4 or 5 albums. So thanks to both those guys, I got the drums done, and everything else I kind of ended up doing myself, which was like the very first album because that was done just after I moved to New Zealand for the first time. So it was almost like a circle being completed in a way. And I'm just happy that people like how it turned out. For me, it was almost like, as you get to the end of the process, it almost becomes like you start getting those, what do they call it, imposter syndrome. And, do I actually need to be putting this out, or is it just a bit of indulgence on my part? And, all those questions which keep on floating in your head. Thankfully, like I put it out, and then, then you wait for to see how it does. It's like a kid, once the kid grows to a certain age, it's out into the world on its own. And now if you just hope that you did a good enough job, so now it's able to, travel on its own and make new friends.
It's really funny how different spaces can get you creative, can make you be so creative. Like what you said about the guitars just being there out in the open and that leading you to make more music. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and plus the silence. I always find it's a much quieter place here in New Zealand. So
Right.
suddenly it's like, you don't have pee pee papa, all the, the million noises. I mean, unless you're living in Himachal or somewhere like that where it is quiet.
Yeah.
But from city to city, this all the one here is a lot quieter. So I kind of enjoyed that as well. Just let your ears open up a bit more.
Yeah. Shreyas, what about you? Yours was also a pandemic album.
Yeah, similar. I just finished a month-long tour of India in February before the pandemic actually kicked off, and it was with this Brooklyn-based guitar player called Xander Naylor. And I found spending time with him on tour to be very inspiring. The amount of time and the attention that he gave to music. I thought I was spending a lot of time, focused on music, but until I hung out with him, I actually had no idea how much time you can actually spend to music and to your craft. So then when I came back in March and everything shut down, things just seemed to fall into place. I was feeling very inspired, and I felt like finally all this music that I'd been wanting to write for years as a drummer, sitting behind and listening to other people's songs, I was like, I could probably do better, but I never really had the time or the patience to sit down and put it there. As a working musician, you're always focused on the next paycheck or a stable income. And it never occurs to you to sit down for maybe 3 to 6 months at a time and work on something which has no immediate return. And then try to figure out how to make that pay. So when the pandemic happened, the option of making a living just disappeared, right? From being a working or a touring musician. And at the same time, you also have this, you have this emotional palette that you can kind of reach into and use to inspire yourself. Otherwise, as a middle class Indian kid, life isn't really all that difficult. You basically have to go outside the margins and look for ways to find interesting stories to tell. And the pandemic just kind of like served it up on the plate, because although, technically we didn't really suffer as much. Being locked at home with a bunch of instruments and not being able to take a vacation isn't really a hardship, but somehow it felt like everyone was going through the same thing, irrespective of, just as easy as watching domestic help or migrant laborers, struggle with their issues. You didn't really feel disconnected from them, because everyone for once felt like we were in the same boat together. And like Warren said, man, just to be able to sit in this room. Pune is extremely peaceful, by the way. You won't hear a horn or anything for like days at a time. So I was in this room with all my instruments, and I decided to sit and put it all together, and the music came into place. And then I finally realized that if you really devote time to something, there's literally no reason it can't happen. I didn't want to pay for the album by reaching into my savings. So I thought, okay, you have varied interests. It's not just music. You also have this fondness for, analytical work. So how about you play poker at night to make money for the album? So I promised myself that I'd deposit 1,000 rupees and I would turn it into a lakh or two by the end of the 3 months when it was time to hit the recording studio. And I did that. So I'd make music from breakfast till dinner time, 9 p.m. I'd eat dinner. And then when everyone else was watching Netflix or whatever crap, I would sit and study statistics, game theory, and then I would play like 3 hours of poker till around 2 p.m. and then go to sleep. And this was my routine every single day without fail for 3 to 4 months. And then by the time the monsoon started and studios were open again, I had saved more than enough of money to pay for the recording of the album and hire a publicist later, all of that shit. It was actually a very informative 3 to 6 months, made me realize that the amount of time that you actually think you're spending with something, you can easily double it. You just need to cut out what you don't think is essential and focus on what the important priorities are. And for me, it's definitely music. And I feel like the pandemic or just focusing on this process has made me realize that I have so many albums and so much music in me that's just ready to come out over the next few years. Not to sound cynical, but man, the pandemic's been, the best thing that could have happened in some ways, for me as a musician, definitely.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to do a shameless plug, but I in the magazine, in our magazine, I have actually written a little bit about how adversity, it really makes artists thrive. It has made historically a lot of art and resulted in a lot of great art and a lot of great artists actually taking out, leaving behind a very strong legacy. So that just kind of illustrates my point. But for you, in Imphal, there's also added barrier of language, Sikhiba, for you and for your band. So that along, I mean, the pandemic is also, it's obviously it's a major thing, but how much of a factor is that the whole non-Hindi or non-English music in terms of not really making the album, I guess, but more in terms of marketing it and finding listeners and takers for it? So what was
Oh,
your overall experience? Yeah.
okay, regarding the language barrier, in Manipur, there is quite a we have some followers, listeners in Manipur. We don't have a problem with the language here because Manipur is also very diverse, like some sort of small India. There are many tribes and all, but Manipuri is a lingua franca here, a ling language. So everyone can understand it. Almost everyone can understand it, and so we don't have a problem with Manipuri in Impal. But when we want to connect with people outside of Manipur, with other states, the barrier definitely came, and yeah. People listen to music for various reasons. Sometimes they just want to listen to the music, and sometimes they seek meaning. So when they want meaning and interpretations, then obviously if they can't understand the language, there is a barrier of it. Yeah. So yeah,
Shreyas, thank you
yeah,
for catching up. You mentioned that you're working on putting out a completely English EP.
yes.
Is that a way to sort of reach more listeners in
Yeah,
the?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a main reason of it. We want to reach out to more people, and the language is definitely comes there. If we were an instrumental music, just instrument, then wouldn't be any kind of that stuff. But yeah, we also give emphasis to lyrics. Yeah, and that's why the language definitely comes there.
Right, right. Uh, Anusha, I would what so independent music continues to be a very DIY process, making especially in India, it's as DIY as it can get. So from creating to writing to producing to marketing, distributing, everything is done by the artists themselves. So what was that whole experience like, and especially doing that in isolation?
Yeah, I feel like Coral has been the most DIY that we have ever gotten. We had, so before the pandemic hit, we had planned on doing Coral in 2020. However, we can, but then because the lockdown came into effect, we couldn't get it done from outside, right? So it kind of gave Pushkar and me a push to like really just do every single thing by ourselves. So it was really cool because Pushkar was hesitating on producing the album himself, but this really gave him a push and he decided, yeah, he's going to do it. And we had to move in together. So that also really forced us to like get on it. The great part was that the songs were already there since the past 5 years. We just hadn't had a chance to even monetarily to sit down and record it. So we bought a mic, we made sure we have the software and everything. We started doing everything at home. Luckily our drummer had a studio, so he could record his drums at home. The only thing we had to actually go out and do was to record our vocals, which we kind of ended up doing towards the latter part of the lockdown when things were opening up. And it really, we can even, as the songs, as you listen through the album, you can also see how it gets better in terms of production and everything, because it was a huge learning curve for us as well.
Right.
But yeah, it led to us having to crowdfund as well, and which we were very, very pleasantly surprised to see how enthusiastically people funded the album. We were also we were quite hesitant about that as well. We weren't sure people going to want to give us money, But it happened, and it also really encouraged us more than anything to see that yes, people are there, they're listening to us, they like the music. So that it really was as DIY as we could.
Hi, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to take a second and tell you more about Gramophone. Gramophone is a plug and play tool that streams HD audio straight to the biggest platforms. It picks up the audio from any source, be it your inbuilt microphone, your Spotify, your iTunes, your Ableton, or your Zoom chat, and it streams the audio to wherever your fans are. This can be your YouTube channel, Twitch, Twitter, or Patreon. It's really the perfect tool for all musicians, podcasters, or anybody who's into live streaming. Gramophone is completely free. Download the app now. So you've been in the industry for a very long time now.
Now my beard is white.
But in all this time, correct me if I'm wrong, but you haven't had a manager or any sort of help that way. You've also kept it DIY to a very large extent.
Yeah, I mean, for gig bookings, my wife Uttara used to handle all that. So at
Right,
least that's something I like. And then she would tour manage as well.
right.
So that was a big help. But apart from that, yeah, I mean, I've kind of grown up recording my own music because like when we started off with Zero back in the late 90s, we didn't have a budget. We didn't have any know-how in that sense. And I was talking to a friend of mine who was like, wouldn't it be cool if there was so and so software and all, he said there is. I'll give it to you. And those days, like software was a bit of a gray thing because you could very easily, get pirated copies, and that's how we started off. So
Mm.
the software gets loaded, the computer can't handle it. You have to take out the heat sink, put it in the freezer, all that kind of stuff. I'll spare you the sordid details. But point being, I've always been pretty hands-on with recording the stuff. Then once it's recorded, then the whole marketing thing and all that's like out of my wheelhouse. Thankfully, I don't know how just putting it out there seemed to, like it's just word of mouth that spreads, and it's not going to like reach 1 million people or anything like that, but those people who really like it will kind of share it. So that's always been like the kind of audience we've had. The people who like it are really into it, but it's not really for, like a mass consumption thing.
Right.
Another question that, another sort of trend that we saw in 2021, or even I think it's actually been there for a while, recent while, but is that you put out singles and then those singles feature in an album. So this sort of has very polarizing effect on an audience. Like I've seen it on, there was a question on Reddit of what is the most annoying thing about music these days, and this was one of the main answers. But it makes sense from an artist perspective. I think it helps a lot in terms of marketing, and for whatever reason, it's clearly happening a lot. So you know what, just an open question to anyone who would like to take this up of, if you are in what sort of camp are you in? Is it like singles first, then put those singles in an album and release the album, or is it like a very old school approach of just the entire album? Yeah, anyone whoever wants to take this.
Okay. Um, so the thing is, like the release, the format that you choose to, or the route that you choose to undertake to release a music comes down to what kind of impact you want it to have, and more importantly, the attention span of the world that you're dealing with right now, right? And at the end of the day, there's no denying that whether you drop 8 songs on the same day or you drop 1 song on the same day, the amount of listenership or just the amount of attention that your music is going to get from audiences from streaming services is limited. Whether you put out an 8-track album or you put out 1 song, streaming services will push it for the first week. Your audiences will be into it for the first 3 days, so on and so forth. I think you're better served by splitting up those 8 tracks as a couple of singles first and then put out the whole thing, because then you get 3 distinct periods, one week period for each single, and then another week for the second single, and then a few more days when the whole album comes out, as opposed to maybe if you put out all 8 songs and all the traction you're getting is in that first week, and then you can kind of see the the streaming numbers drop off. So I feel like you might be doing yourself a slight disservice as an artist by releasing everything all at the same time, even though it might be the way you want to go about it. Um, at the end of the day, you're trying to find a balance between what feels right to you as well as what objectively is going to get you the most amount of traction for your music. So personally, I don't have any problems with releasing music as singles first. What I do have a problem with is people who can only write singles and can't write music in like long form content. It's like making, you know, a TV show with 20 great episodes is always going to tell a much better and more coherent story than an hour and a half long movie. So people who have something significant to say, I still prefer them writing at least an EP, you know, if not a full length album, as opposed to maybe just one catchy single after another.
Yeah, I would just jump in and say that this was actually something that both Pushka and I really struggled with in the beginning. At least we were pretty much, old school full album listeners. And it's something I struggled with quite a bit actually, because it also seemed like you had to, do the whole marketing, publicity every single time you release a single, and then also do it for the album. For somebody who's maybe not as comfortable with social media or things like that, it felt like a lot of work personally to me. But I also do agree with Shreyas completely, because considering it feels like you are not changing with the times if you stick to that, and especially if you don't have some kind of a hold in the scene already, it feels like releasing singles really does help. um Helps with playlisting, all of those things, which may seem like, temporary advantages, but they're advantages nonetheless right now. So that's what we ended up doing. We decided to release, 3 singles from the album and then release the album later. And it does help, I guess.
Just want to jump in and introduce Mali. Hi, Mali.
Hi.
She put out her album Caution.
Sorry, I'm late.
No, that's okay. She put out her album Caution to the Wind last year, which also made it to the list. And we wanted to also include, get her, understand her experience of putting this album out. Mali, I think from context, you figured out that we're talking about the singles versus albums debate. And we're trying to understand which camp all of you reside in. In fact, what Shreyas said about the albums being more cohesive and singles, like you not being able to express so much through singles. For Caution to the Wind, a lot of the songs were written before, right? It's not that you wrote all of the songs together. They all came through together when you put the
Yeah,
album out,
yeah.
but they were written at different periods of time. So, what do you think about this?
For Caution to the Wind, I think it was more about not writing to be an album. It was more of producing it to be an album. I don't know why I did that, sorry. But no, it was more, the challenge was more to produce it to be an album and getting everything to sonically sound like they belong on the album. And that was the first time I was doing something like that, because before that I'd done an EP, and though we'd recorded it all on the same day, it still, in my mind, it was still like very disjointed. It didn't really have the feel of an EP as such. But the album, even though they were all songs written at different times, I think it did come together as an album in the end pretty well. But that said, like after having released an album, I think a part of me kicked myself and said, would it have been more worth it to like release them as individual singles? Because based on the order of the songs on the album, they got different amounts of attention.
Right.
Like there are songs that are, second last, last, third last, which are like also really good songs. And I feel terrible that they just have not gotten that attention, because everyone is generally pretty ADD these days, and like they will listen to the first song, second song, third song, be like, hey man, great album. And that doesn't really cut it. And, then you try and do things where you try and post promote those singles to kind of like give them a little bit of a shot in the arm that they need. And then it never really gets the attention that it gets when the album is brand new. and people are like ready to check it out. So yeah, I think the next time I'm still trying to figure out if it is worth putting out singles, because there is an argument of like, do we change with the times and do we change with the way we release stuff and the frequency with which we release stuff. But then I don't know, like Shreya said, like, I mean, I'm so much of an album person. Just yesterday, I had a friend over and I made them endure the entire Hell Freezes Over Eagles album, and I sang everything, every guitar solo, every lyric, every drum roll. But yeah, I did it. And I realized that like that's what the album, the whole point of an album is, like you know which song comes after this song ends. Like, there's that. And sadly, that's just not been the case in the past like 5-10 years. And I don't know, as an artist, like, do you take the risk of putting so much money and time and effort into making a coherent piece of music, like a comprehensive EP or an album, and just have an audience that doesn't treat it the same way you would? I don't know. I'm thinking about it as well, and I'm listening to you guys, and I'm hoping you can also shed some light on it.
That's actually very interesting because I please tell me your takes on this. But do you all also consume music as entire albums, or do you listen to playlists or singles more?
No, albums almost exclusively. If it's not in a good album form, then I won't even like. There's no chance. It's so odd. I don't think I've ever jumped in midway in an album just to listen to a song because it's a great song. It's usually part of a great album, and you can't listen to the song out of context, right? The whole story has this amazing, relatable like thing to tell you. So definitely album format.
Yeah. Sikhiba, what about you? You're on mute.
Yeah. Audible now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Regarding listening, I listen to albums, but I also listen to playlists and singles also. But about making music, I prefer albums. And it also depends a lot on the artist and also the audience they want also. And it also depends on the stage or pace of the artist. If an artist is just starting out in this age, I think it will be better if they start with a single or a small EP, because after they have put all their effort and money and they just release a whole album as a debut, and they might not get as much as followers. But after they have a stable following, a fan base, then I think it is better to release albums. And our album, we started out as a band, we started out with singles, and the singles got the attention first. And we have always wanted to create an album, and it happened last year in July. We recorded the album in just 6-7 days, the whole album, the 10 tracks. And I think we could do that because of the pandemic. The curfew happened, and we already planned to record album, but the notice of the curfew came out, a complete curfew. People can't go, or it was very, the cases of COVID-19 infected people were mushrooming, so the government had to take all those measures. And after the notice came out, I mean, my story is a little deviated from the album versus single thing. I'm just narrating how we recorded the album. Yeah.
No, we would love to know more. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The notice of the curfew came out, and we were the 5 of us, the band members, and we have a friend who knows sound engineering stuff. Then we talked, hey, we should go somewhere else together, stay there together, residential thing. We should take our food, clothes, and all instruments, and we should record. That is how we recorded. We stayed together. We lived together during those days.
Right.
And we don't have a good space for it. So we have a very good brother, and Aku Singangbom Sukanya, you must have also, I think, of Impal Tokis band.
Oh, right.
Yeah. He runs a place called the Foothill. It is just like a homestay. We asked him if we can stay there for a while, and he agreed, and we packed our things and we go there, and it was complete curfew, and we took everything that will be required, food and all, and yeah, that's how we recorded. It was not a studio, it was a home. And we even recorded the vocals there with just, and we recorded the whole album using just one mic. And for the drums, to be very honest, it was not actual drums. We did a lot of programming, and yeah, but that is one thing that we are not satisfied with it. We wanted to use real drums, but we couldn't do that. Yeah, that's how we recorded the album.
Okay. Hopefully on the next EP.
Yeah.
Warren, you have always chosen to put out albums.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, if you look at how expensive it is to record per song, it's always more economical to do an album thing.
Right.
And generally, like say from the third, fourth, and fifth Blackstratblues albums, you just book 2 or 3 days in the studio and go and bang it out, And then I would take the tracks home and work on it some more. But in the terms of like studio costs, it would just be those 3 days, and then you're free to do at home how much ever you want. So in that sense, it made more sense. And once it's come together as an album, uh, I mean, you can totally do that. You can collect a whole bunch of songs which are already ready and then drip feed them one by one just to keep that. For me, that process is traumatic because the whole marketing and publicity thing is like, I'd rather be focused on making music, and then whoever wants to listen to it, let them listen to it. And at this stage in my life, I'm not like chasing fame and fortune and all that. So I mean, as long as I can make a living and continue putting out music, purpose is solved. And in terms of consumption, I've always generally been an album person, but these days having a 5-year-old, she makes me make playlists to listen to in the car and stuff. Oh, I like this song, I like that song. So to make her listen to an album is a little bit of a challenge. So in that sense, most of the time I, spend listening to music, I'm listening with her around or whatever. Unless it's late at night, then sometimes I get to put on something and, just peace out and do nothing but listen. But I can totally see, both sides of things. Attention spans are shorter. I mean, just the way we are consuming everything from social media to films and TV series and so on and so forth. But the interesting thing is, like, you notice, like, if people are watching like a season of something on Netflix, they can actually binge watch a whole thing. So in that case, the attention span is there. So if you can spend time to watch one episode, you can spend time and listen to an album. That, if you look at the time, it's just under an hour.
Yeah.
It's fine. So it just depends upon who's listening. What are you putting out? Are you putting music for, like, 15-year-old kids, or you want to have an audience who does consume it? So there's not to say one is better than the other. It's just what you're trying to achieve as an artist. Then there'll be certain parameters which work better one way or the other. So you need to be mindful of that and accordingly plan your strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of trends and speaking of marketing, obviously, you guys would not be oblivious to the fact of how music has blown up on TikTok and now, of course, Reels, and often also not credited to the artist. It's original song by an influencer or likewise. But have you have you even for a second considered tailoring your music, or apart from not just like the promotion is one thing, promotion is okay, but like having something exclusively blow up on Reels, because obviously the effect is is there for everyone to see. People recognize there have been musicians who have just just blown up through the last 2 years, just exclusively through this medium. So yeah, I mean, again, this is open to anyone who wants to take it up. Yeah. Anusha, I think I would really like to address this to you first.
I'm just laughing because I feel like I cannot contribute to this conversation because it's something that I really struggle with. It took us quite some time to even face up to the fact that yes, we have to post, we have to promote our stuff, otherwise it's not really, going to do much. And if you just try to do everything yourself the way you want it, be passive about it. So it was a long journey for us to even come and accept the fact that okay, you have to use social media, it's a tool, not see it as this slave driving machine. That's why I laughed, because we constantly kind of talk about it like, okay, should we make songs smaller? Should we? And then the moment we even utter those questions, I'm like, how can I even ask this question? It's really that much of a struggle. We haven't reached the point yet where we're like, let's write a song for a reel or let's do something for this. We haven't reached the point, and I think that there will always be something in us which will stop us from doing that. But I can also see how it's great though, like for people who enjoy doing it. I think it's amazing that you love doing it and then it also gets you what you want. I think it's great. Yeah.
So in my case, the good thing is it's the first album was instrumental jazz. So I don't think, like Warren said, not chasing fame. I just want to make a living, a comfortable living, making the music that I want to make. And also generationally, I feel like I'm fortunate enough to be part of a generation that didn't have, a lot of this technology growing up, and TikTok and stuff doesn't even enter our vocabulary. It might be a valuable marketing tool, but it's not something that I want to mess around with. I feel my personal views on the dumbing down of human society aside, I feel like I would rather just put my music out there and let the audience find me. I will use Instagram as a tool to help spread the word, but I would much rather email the album to a handful of people, say Bobbin at Apple Music, you guys, and then let them kind of handle it from there, then try to appeal to an audience that might not necessarily resonate with my music in the first place. And then in order to force them to listen to my music, to make it almost gimmicky, is not something. And I will never tailor the kind of music that I make for a particular medium. There's no way I'll change the kind of music I'm going to make just to kind of enhance the method of distribution that's available to me. I feel like that kind of compromise is not something that I want to make just yet. If things get really bad, then I might do a whole song and dance, but let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Mali, what about you? Any?
Yeah. No, I don't think I'm on the same page as both Anusha and Shreyas. Like, I don't think I'm capable, even if someone put a gun to my head and said, hey, why don't you write a real song? I don't think I'm capable of doing that convincingly yet. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. But that said, like when my album did come out, there were some people who used the music that I made for reels.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the songs had like an existing, okay, say for example, Age of Limbo, which is a song that came out with the lockdown footage and stuff. There was, for a very brief period of time, a few people posting videos. I don't know if reels were a thing at that time just yet, but they would post videos of, empty places and kind of on the same theme, almost as if the video gave them a template for how to make, reel-like videos with the same song.
Yeah.
So that was cool, and that gave me a little bit of traction, but it wasn't like a full-blown popular reel type of trend or anything like that. And I think that was organic enough for it to be like a real song, but also at the same time, I didn't write the song for that purpose at all. So if something like that happens, I'm okay with it, but I don't think I will, go ahead and write something for that purpose, to answer the question.
Consciously make that effort to sort of, like, that's not the end goal.
The same thing happened with, and Sukanya covers this in another plug. She covers it in her article in our magazine about the short form content. The same thing happened with Kanishk Seth's Rangi Sari, right? Like the song was put out in 2020.
A year
And
before that, yeah.
and it blew up last year, and the people are making sandwiches to it, and it's just like it has that the trending mark, the stamp of approval, and it just so happened it's a beautiful song, and it just blew up. So that's obviously, it's an added advantage. But yeah, I think we have a consensus here.
Yeah. Uh, so, okay, so talking about stuff that you would or would not do, what are some things that people keep talking about when it comes to independent music? For example, we keep hearing that, indie is the next big thing and film music is on the down, and independent music is going to blow up, especially also with streaming, and there are more playlists now, there's more discoverability now, there's more access to independent music now. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that the future of independent music in India is as bright as we think it is? Warren, why don't you take that first?
If I knew the answer to that, I'd be running a record company or something, and I could make money on predicting trends. But I don't know. I mean, I've seen like this thing come in cycles at least a few times. Like
Yeah.
when I moved to New Zealand first, I think it was 2004, and just after that there was like a big indie boom. And
Right.
then that culminated towards the end of the 2000s in festivals like NH7 opening up. Like I played the first NH7 and like I think 5 or 6 subsequent ones. And you can see like the whole thing growing. I don't really think Bollywood's going to go away anytime soon. I mean, it's too deeply entrenched in our public consciousness to just suddenly take a backseat. And um, I mean, if you notice, like different trends keep popping up. There was a huge hip hop thing that happened, and then Bollywood kind of co-opts that, and it kind
Right.
of get assimilated or swallowed up or whatever you want to call it. So there'll always be that happening. Um, it comes down to actually what the people in charge of music in films, like music supervisors or the directors or whoever is the one taking the call. Um, on Instead of having one music director having say 7 or 8 indie artists, like you look at any other country like the UK or the US or wherever, I don't really think film music is going to be like in the top 10 or top 20. There'll maybe be like one film in which like the song becomes popular, but it's not a dominant trend year after year, that sort of thing. So in that sense, India is kind of unique. So there'll definitely be more, especially once, artists start singing in regional languages apart from, English, that'll kind of grow. Then, it's like the urban audience also tends to grow as, we move upwards in the social strata. Then your friends say, "Oh, have you heard this?" And then you'd want to check it out, because you don't want to be left out, that sort of thing. So that cross pollination keeps happening. So, it's only going to grow this way. It's not like, Bollywood's gone and Indies here. That's never going to happen in that sense. It'll always be, different things will keep happening. I think also with like the development of local, like say Netflix, for example, there's a different kind of aesthetic to that music versus, like a mainstream Bollywood blockbuster. You don't have that urge to catch your audience and slap them with, the most obvious thing. There's a little bit of subtlety that can be employed. So those are all heartening things. You can actually see the development for something. I mean, even when say Shankar Ehsaan Loy came up with Dil Chahta Hai, that was actually quite a big polarizing thing in Bollywood. That was like, oh, now we can do this instead. And when Rahman came out, it was the same thing. So they'll keep on being these things, but I don't really see the thing of like like when say Nirvana came out and all those hair metal bands went away and then this became the mainstream. I don't really see that happening, but I mean I could be wrong. So yeah, that's my take on it.
So one does not take over the other. It kind of.
Yeah, usually it ends up co-opting. At the end of the day, money talks, man. So wherever the money is coming from.
Yeah.
If someone calls me and say, "Hey, will you do a film for this?" and as long as the story matters, it appeals to me, that sort of thing, I'll do it. Till now, I haven't done it. And there's another thing as well, like especially with Bollywood, of the trend for the music director, the songwriter, not to retain the rights to the music. So I've never really been a fan of that.
Right.
So which is why I was like, nah, I'll do my thing, and then if you want me to contribute to that, and I'm not going to like be the music director or whatever. So I've always been like one step away from that.
Mm.
Yeah.
You compose music for a film, give away the rights, and then 20 years later there's a remix of the song.
I've seen music directors unable to play their own songs because
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that's been really sad. I was like, I never want to be in that place ever.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Shreyas, you wanted to add something to that?
Well, not really. I feel like Warren mentioned pretty basically covered all the bases. And the most important thing, as OTT platforms introduce an upwardly mobile urban audience, even if 10% of India's population switches from listening to exclusively Hindi and Bollywood music to listening to more independent music, that's still 120 million people right there, right? And so whether independent music blows up or not by any metric, it's possible now to have a sustainable career as an independent musician
Right.
in India, which I think is the only thing that most independent musicians are really focused about. Can I make a living without having to go play drums for a Bollywood band, or to be a session musician for a Bollywood song, which are all great things to do. I mean, I have nothing but fond memories of all that crap and composing for Bollywood. But at the same time, it would be nice to have the option to do what you want to do on your terms and be able to make a sustainable living. And I think that trend is pretty inevitable. So for my next release, I plan to do one single on streaming services and then just distribute the rest of it on Bandcamp for whoever wants to buy it. As an experiment, I want to see if that's a sustainable model, and maybe engage with 1,000 people who are willing to purchase the album, then to engage with 25,000 people on a Spotify editorial platform who don't even know the name of the song because it's just going song by song on that playlist. So we'll see how that works out as a business model.
Then just jump in there because I kind of did a similar thing with this album. I put it out on Bandcamp for a week and a half, and then it went on streaming services. The Bandcamp thing totally paid for the cost of recording the album. So, and there was a little bit more to buy guitar strings and things like that. So it was, I'd suggest, yeah, try that. Just try the Bandcamp initial thing, because the people who really want to listen to it right away will jump on it. And Bandcamp's not really that
Yeah.
expensive. An average cost of an album is $5 to $7 or whatever, which is the cost
Yeah.
of a meal at an ODP restaurant. So totally affordable in that
True.
sense. It's the people who don't want to pay for it at all and would rather listen to free Spotify with the ads. That's cool. I mean, you wait a couple of weeks, you'll get it, so that's totally fine.
Yeah, with the ads.
It's exactly what Shreyas was saying early on about us also trying print. Would you rather have a smaller group of people who would pay a larger amount of money for your product, or the masses who would not pay, but you get the numbers? It's that choice.
Clicks for us, yeah, for sure. Right. So I think to sort of wrap up the discussion, just taking from here, what are some of the things that each of you would not like to hear anymore in the business, be it from your fans also, from venues, from people at streaming platforms, companies, business, like just, or from your fellow peers as well. So just, yeah, feel free to say as many, or yeah, not as few, but like a few. Yeah. Mally, you want to probably start? Anything that you don't want to hear, or maybe hear more of?
Why don't you do covers online? I think that's one, like that's a big one. Like I'm really terrible at it. I think ever since I started, at one point my full focus was to make an entire original set. Like this was maybe about 6-7 years ago. And then when I did that, I think the whole quest of learning new songs and like perfecting covering songs just like went out the window. And then I started becoming really bad at it. And I realized that the best thing I could do is keep writing more of my music and trying to find new ways to play my own stuff. And I think very often people, especially if they're used to consuming music a certain way, which is on YouTube, and they discover covers of songs that they've known for like 10, 20 years, that almost like connects them to the artist that's singing it in a way that no new, even amazing song could do. And so they're doing this, that they're giving you that advice with the best of their interest. But then, yeah, that's something I really wish I could hear less, because that's not something I would naturally do. Yeah.
Anusha?
I guess personally, I would say that the one question that bothers me a lot is, why don't you write in Hindi? I feel like my answer is, if I could, I would, to be honest. But because we grew up on a certain kind of music, or it's because of the music we listen to, right? I feel like we write the music, which is a culmination of everything we listen to. And everything we listen to is mostly English, right? For us, at least. So, and that's what comes out. And I understand that, writing in Hindi or another regional language would make the reach larger. But like I said, if I could do it, I would.
Is that
Just-
a sentiment shared by anybody else here? Because I feel like none of you perform in Hindi.
I mean, it's because Hindi isn't our first language, right?
Yeah.
I don't think any of us dream in Hindi. I don't think any of us, like your go-to thoughts show up in Hindi. They don't. I mean, you send us into like convent schools or whatever, you bash this English language, you ban us from speaking Hindi. We don't consume our media in Hindi. So fair enough. I don't think it's a problem or a complaint. It's just who we are. And people who want to switch to a profitable or a more profitable audience will make the change to Hindi. That doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but like she said, if I could churn out 100 songs a year in Hindi that would like appeal to everyone in the country, I would most certainly be doing it. It's the language of delivery is not a compromise or anything. It's just what we're capable of doing.
Absolutely. I mean, I do want to just say that Hindi is the native tongue for both me and Pushkar. So it should feel like it's easy, but it's, yeah, I mean, it's just like I said, the music that you listen to and that you like. And I feel like, I also feel like I would love to listen to more native languages, right, from the country, which is why I told Sikhiba also that I'm so glad that they're writing in Manipuri. We need more music in the languages that you don't really hear. But I also feel like there's so much music out there, so many great musicians already doing it in Hindi, right? So I want to do something that's true to me, that's true to us. So that's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Can you just say as like an audience member, it's never, I mean, the audience, it never really matters like what the language is, as long as the music is done really well. Like there's bands from Sweden that I listen to. I don't understand Swedish, but
Yeah.
the music is spectacular and, doesn't really get in the way. And also like with any sort of language, there's a certain way the language sounds, like phonetically and everything. So like there's certain people who can make a language sound great that goes well with the music. And that's like a skill. So if it's done well, it doesn't really matter, because like I find myself singing random phrases in Swedish or African or whatever language it is, so it doesn't really matter as long as it's done well. So that it's totally possible. You never let the
Yeah.
language come in the way.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I
But
guess
a
most of the
Tamilian,
population speaks Hindi, so numbers again.
on that phonetic thing, a Tamilian speaking Hindi just sounds very wrong. I've noticed it. So yeah, I think it's best that I stay away from, just using that language in the day to day. It's like, whatever. It's like a girl in Bandra or something like that. It's just not ideal.
To add to that, I just actually completed work on a Tamil singer.
Oh,
It's not something that I wrote, but because I've been born and raised in Chennai, Tamil is like still a language that I relate to so much more than Hindi. Even if someone said you had to sing this Hindi song, I would be less comfortable with it than actually composing a whole new song in Tamil. That said, it's very different to anything that has been made, and I'm a little like nervous about how it will be received. But I mean, for me, it's more of an experiment. It's more of paying tribute to where I'm from and the only Indian language I can claim to be fluent at. So yeah, let's see. I mean, I think it's at the end of the day, like Anusha said, it has to come naturally to you, whatever it is. If it's a language that you relate to, a language that you've grown up around a lot, that you can think in, then when you perform it, when you sing it, it comes so much more naturally. So that's just the bottom line, I would say. If there's so many people who are bilingual writers, like I know artists like Siabilasha and Kamakshi, for example, who speak as much Hindi as they do English, and they write convincingly in both languages, and it comes through. You know, you can hear it. It doesn't sound like they're forcing it. So I think it's just at the end of the day, it's just about that.
Yeah, that's so true. And in fact, what Warren was saying about it sounding good, that's exactly why we liked the Meewakching album also. We did not understand a word of Manipuri, but it's done so well. And now that you tell us that you did it in a homestay, I mean, that it's just mind blowing. We completely resonated with the album and without understanding a single word of it.
Thank you so much. And the thing about Hindi is it's a very different case here in Manipur. I mean, like Anusha said, people ask her to why don't she sing in Hindi? That kind of question doesn't arise here, because Hindi is not our first language, and moreover, there are a lot of political things going on here in Manipur regarding Hindi, and Hindi is actually banned here by insurgents and all, because the relationship between the Indian government and Manipur is it's a very different thing. Yeah, so Hindi is not an issue here. I mean, not issue regarding people can actually get a lot of fans even if they don't sing in Hindi. Manipuri is a really big thing in here. And but if a Manipuri band wants to connect with more people of the rest of the country, then I think sometimes English or other languages where more people can understand is also necessary at some points of time.
Right.
Yeah. And regarding the question that Akriti arised about what one thing that we are annoyed or tired of, in my experience, I don't have something that recurs that people always annoys. But there was once a incident, an instance where one of our listeners, a fan actually, he cannot understand the thing about merchandise, and also when we put out our merches, and he asked, why do you put those stuff? Just make good music. Are you a business band or something like that? Maybe he isn't aware of it, because that doesn't go with the mainstream thing, you know. And also about Bollywood, I don't know, people don't sell merches for Arjit Singh, or I don't know. Yeah, that doesn't happen here, so they don't understand the thing about it. I mean, a few people, they don't understand about merchandise and all. Yeah, that's one thing that I actually got infuriated.
Warren, what's one thing that you would like to hear less of or more of?
Well, I think people actually stopped giving me suggestions because they know I don't really do anything about it. I don't know. I mean, sometimes like when you're doing Instagram lives or something, then people keep, the same old requests and, that sort of thing, which gets a little bit. So I'd say very politely, hey, how about I can choose what I want to play right now, because you're not really paying for this. So let me just do what I want to do right now. Or sometimes I'm totally open, like hey, give me a song to do, I'll play it for you if I know it. That sort of thing. So it's a little bit of like read the artist's mood before you start flinging stuff. That's just not.
Nice. Shreyas, one thing that you
Tired of people asking me to play Careless Whisper. I mean, just because it's the saxophone doesn't mean. And the sad thing is, I can't play it yet, which is why if I could play it, I would have no problems with people asking me to do that. I would just show up at random places and blast. But honestly, no, I have no. I mean, like Warren said, he doesn't take suggestions, and I live in such a social bubble. I don't really leave this room. I don't talk to too many people. I have zero musician friends. I don't interact with fans. So honestly, nothing at all bothers me, except maybe venues trying to pay artists. Like venues pay so little now that it's just difficult to do shows out of town, man. And I feel like venues need to start considering the economics of what it takes to fly. You know, I'm forced to bring my sets down to 3-piece sets, 4-piece sets. I can't bring a percussionist. I can't bring a second horn instrument because it's just not possible to fly 5 people to Delhi to do 2 shows at the Piano Man. So I feel like maybe venue owners need to start taking that into consideration, because another 10,000 rupees for them is not really going to make the whole thing financially not feasible. But for a band, it's literally the difference between being able to do that show and even breaking even versus not being able to do that show because it's not possible to come out of it with any money.
Right. Right. That's definitely one of the things that we would also like to see more of. I mean, Delhi does not have more than 1 or 2 venues, so we don't even get to go and see artists, and most of the artists are not able to come and perform here because of that very reason. So hopefully
Yeah.
that changes soon. But thank you everyone for joining us for this discussion. It was very nice to hear your thoughts and learn about your experience of putting out music this year. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having
guys.
us.
Thanks for calling us on.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be being here.
Thank you.